kusesa bakomo pamaiwaje
ugaja mama
early morning
amadinga taje
kusesa bakomo aimbae zogo matumaona lero ndipo chalamanda aimbae zogo matumaona lero
ndamva kuti mwakwatira mwabala mwana woyera zina lache Musolo.
Unamva kwa ndani kuti mtakwatira?
Ndamva kuti mwakwatira mwabala mwana woyera zina lache Musolo.
Unangopanga chikose ukwati ntakuita mali
Musolo,
Musolo mai Musolo mai
mwana mene ndamai wache ndikufuna ndipite nawo ku UK. Mwana mene ndamai wache ndikufuna ndipite nawo ku UK.
Mapunziro onse akapunzire ku UK. Mapunziro onse
apunzire ku UK.
Namba koko ndamva komatimbeko chemeri kunali chemeri kunali
chemeri mama mwe
iya meri mwe iya dale kunali chemeri iya meri mwe iya dale
chemeri
ibe kukoma pacha iya kunali chemeri
akafuna kunenana
Agidesi akidesi inabwana tagera nikuno
akafuna kunenana
chalamanda 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 inabwana tagera nikuno
akafuna kunenana
akidesi 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 inabwana tagera nikuno sinali choncho kale nthawi ya Napolo iwachabe Napolo iwachabe wachabe
Napolo
wachabe
watengaingalamu tengaingalamu ukataya kumtenga kutuma kaidi ukatola kobela dona nalila maiwe wachabe Napolo wachabe Napolo wachabe
Malizendi Buffalo soldier
Buffalo soldier
Buffalo to America Buffalo soldier Buffalo to America.
When I was a young boy
I dreamed to day in America.
When I was
Good morning, everyone. I welcome you to the International Translation Day celebration organized by the French Department of the University of Ghana. I'm glad to share this day with you. I am Linda Esinamdake, your moderator for today. And I welcome you all, colleague lecturers, translators, interpreters, and students, everyone, all protocols observed. A hearty welcome to Mr. First Quist. Thank you very much for coming. We have the head of the Department of French also here with us. Thank you very much. Mr. First Paul, sorry for coming. Edem, I see you. You are welcome. Thank you all. I'm elated to share this day with you, and also particularly because it's our day as language professionals, an opportunity for us to pause and remind ourselves and the world about the critical role we play as language professionals in the development of the world at large. And so I welcome you all and I wish you an interesting session. Without wasting much time, I'll invite the head of department to give us the welcome address. Dr. Chachu.
Good morning, Linda. Thank you very much. Bonjour à tous. Good morning, everyone. I think it's probably afternoon in Belgium where Professor Flynn is. And so good afternoon to those of you who are joining us from Belgium or from other parts of the world where it's already afternoon. It's really a pleasure for the Department of French to host you to our first International Translation Day event. Of course, because of the pandemic, we're holding it virtually. But that also is an advantage because it gives us the opportunity to have people joining us from different places, I can see Dr. Risikatu is with us from Benin. I've seen Dr. Mariam Verma also from Nigeria. I'm sure we have colleagues joining us from other countries as well, those from Togo, those from Burkina Faso. We are really, really grateful to have you. We are also welcoming our students, our graduate students, and then our undergraduate students, colleagues, colleague lecturers in translation and interpreting who are here. We all know that usually when you study language, there are usually three things you do with the language. The first is those who study the language to teach the language. So that is most of us in the various faculties, those who teach the various languages, either at the basic or the secondary level. And then we have those who work with the language as an addition to whatever skill they have. So we may have people who are economists or lawyers or international affairs diplomats who would use the language in their profession. But the third one, and that is where I think our focus is today, are those who use the language to facilitate communication, either as translators or interpreters. I know that for those of us who've been either involved as translators or interpreters or trainers, most people in the general public box everything together and consider everything to be translation. And in our context today, as we are celebrating the International Translation Day, we are having this same mindset that International Translation Day involves both translation and interpretation. I'd really like to say a big thank you to the committee that put this together. I know that it was a spur of the moment discussion and decision, but I'm glad that in the space of less than a month, they were able to put the program together. I'm so thankful to Professor Peter Flynn for also accepting to be the keynote speaker. We met at the ATSA conference in June where he brilliantly presented. So I'm really excited that we have him here again. And so thank you all very much. I'm hoping that we'll have very fruitful discussions and collaborations. It's International Translation Day, but it's a Department of French, so you would know that we're a bit biased towards French as well. So just for the sake also of my colleagues, nous sommes très contents et heureux de vous avoir parmi nous, nos collègues francophones. Et comme j'ai déjà dit, c'est pour échanger par rapport à la traduction et à l'interprétation. Et nous espérons que les échanges seront très fructueux et qu'après, on va continuer la discussion, soit par des recherches, soit par des partenariats, mais poser des questions pendant les sessions, soit dans le chat, soit lorsqu'il y a l'occasion de parler. And so for everyone during the Q&A session after Professor Flynn's message, please feel free to take part in the Q&A session. You can either put your questions in the chat box, or when there's opportunity to speak, you raise your hands to speak. Once more, thank you, and we welcome you, and let's enjoy these 2 hours together. Thank you. I hand over to Linda.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chachu, for those refreshing words. Up next, we have our keynote speech. Our keynote speaker is a professor emeritus who has lectured in translation studies and English and lectures at KU Leuven Antwerp campus from September 2006 until October 2020. He completed a PhD in language and literature at Ghent University, where he worked as a lecturer at the English department from 1990 to 2006. The title of his dissertation is A Linguistic Ethnography of Literary Translation, Irish Poems and Dutch-Speaking Translators, and comprises a linguistic ethnographic study of literary translation practices among translators in the Netherlands and Flanders, as well as a corpus study of Irish poetry in Dutch translation. He co-organized translation conferences and events on a yearly basis since 2000 and has published widely on translation and related topics. His main areas of interest include ethnographies of translation practices, empirical and functionalist approaches to translation studies, linguistic ethnography, Irish literature, and social linguistics. He is a member of the Central Teaching Staff and a research fellow at UFS Bloemfontein, and continues to work as a guest lecturer in translation studies and a freelance literary translator. Our keynote speaker is Professor Peter Flynn. And as the head of department rightly said, he gave a brilliant presentation at the ATSA conference in June this year. And so I assure you that you are going to enjoy this particular session. Professor Flynn accepted our invitation to address this session without hesitation, even though it was on a short notice. And so Professor Flynn, we are very grateful for accepting to address this session. Over to you, Professor Flynn.
Thank you very much, Linda. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Thank you, and thank you, Dr. Chachu, for the introduction as well, and all the people at the French department for putting this together at such short notice.
Yeah, it's Mr. Wobby. Can you?
I really enjoyed my time with you during the June conference, so I had no hesitation in saying yes to do it again. So I'm looking forward to talking to you today. I've made a PowerPoint, which I'd like to share with you now. I'm just going to put it up. This is my PowerPoint. Can you see this? Is this visible?
Yes.
Okay. So because I only have a short time to speak, I'm going to get started straight away and leave room for questions afterwards. I'm very happy to be here, and I'm good to talk about the topic of being united in translation, which is the title of today's session. And I'll be talking on the topic of Saint Jerome, because today is the patron saint's day, Saint Jerome's Day, and he is the patron saint, as you probably know, of translation. Here's an outline of what I want to talk about. So I'd like to focus on the legend of Saint Jerome, and also of Androcles, which is an older legend, and the relations between humans and nature. And this will involve a double movement in which I will show you some paintings of the legend of Saint Jerome and Androcles. And so the movement will be from the story to painting, so how the story was transformed into a painting. And then the second one, which is more our kind of neck of the woods, if you like, painting the story and ways of reading the painted story and conceptualizing it in terms of translation. And what I like to point out is that perhaps the translation is an unnoticed theme in all of these paintings, but I'll get to that later. And at the end, I'd like to link in terms of, being united in translation. I'd like to link this talk to present day's notions of translation and the relationship between translation and ecology and sustainability. So let's get started. The basic story of the legend of Saint Jerome and of Androcles, by the way, is how the saint or the enslaved person removed the thorn from the lion's paw and was rewarded by eternal loyalty. And the possible themes underlying this little story is the communication between nature and humankind. After all, the Androcles or St. Jerome had to get close enough to a lion to be able to remove a thorn from his paw. And this is also sort of, in a way, we could say, a kind of an indication of an imbalance in the world. So the suffering of the lion and the sympathy of St. Jerome or Androcles towards the lion. So they managed to redress an imbalance in nature and create, if you like, a new type of unity. And my argument is that this happens through the medium of translation. So we're going to start with one of the oldest depictions of St. Jerome. And this was painted by Rogier van der Weyden, who's a Flemish painter. And this dates from 1450 rather. Van der Weyden lived in a town called Doornik, which is now in the southwest of Belgium, but was then in France. And here we see, if you look a little closer, you can see St. Jerome taking time off from reading scripture to remove the thorn from the lion's paw. And you notice it, probably van der Weyden hadn't actually encountered a lion before, because this lion is very emblematic looking. It looks more like something that would find on a flag rather than in nature. And behind him, we have another scene of St. Jerome dressed as a hermit, in which he has removed his clothes and is contemplating whatever it is he was contemplating. So this particular painting set off a whole genre of St. Jerome art. So paintings, sculptures, etc., that sort of carried on and the legend of St. Jerome and his encounter with the lion over centuries, which we will see. The next one I have to show you is a famous depiction of St. Jerome by the German artist Albrecht Dürer. And this dates from 1514. So it's later on, but it's still in the same vein of genre of paintings. This is an engraving, actually. And here we see St. Jerome in his study, and you notice the light coming in from the left and the halo of light around his head, and he's busy studying and probably translating. We can't tell, but at the same time we notice that the lion is here in the foreground next to a dog, which is a very strange combination. But this whole painting emanates a certain harmony and contemplation. Now I will turn to the story of Androcles, this story isn't actually older than that of St. Jerome, but tells basically the same story. And here we see, this is the quote from the book, the slave Androcles plucks the thorn from the lion's paw. And this is belongs in the collection of stories, and we see how the lion is in agony here. And we see the dark background of the forest and the light foreground and the thorn being removed. And this same story is depicted again here by the Italian Peruzzi in the 1530s, where we see the young Androcles with his lion parading around the town, obviously completely at ease, as are the other people in the story. But behind that, we have a second scene. If you look more closely, you will see Androcles with the lion, and he's acting like a shepherd, caring for all the creatures of the forest. So this also creates a sense of harmony and peace that is important. So the first movement being from story to painting, here we see the four paintings next to each other. So all of these imaginings are translations of elements of story into image. and each has its own specific semiotic charge. So they tell the story in different ways, and they contextualize it in different ways. And you notice that the language, the pictorial language they use, is understandable to the people who would have seen it when they were painted. So they would recognize certain elements in this in each painting, like in this case, the first one, Saint Jerome's clothing is that of a cardinal, or the Androclus in the bottom left is dressed as a contemporary of the Italian artist of the day. So you would call these, if you like, domesticated or domesticating translations. So all of these paintings took on a life of their own and have been, I'm talking to you about them now. And they illustrate a never-ending, the nature of translation that sets off a chain of associations and also maintains these associations while continually linking us and bringing us together in all sorts of different ways. So that was the movement one. So from the painting, from the story or elements of the story to the painting. And now we're going to look at the paintings and consider them as stories themselves in a way, and look at how they depict the legend of Androclus or of Saint Jerome, and how they deal with it. What type of story do they tell us, and how are we going to, from a theoretical point of view, how are we going to approach them? So we can approach them from the point of view of what's called ekphrasis, which is a Greek word for telling what a picture says, so a written description, or, and this is probably more familiar to us, what Roman Jakobson called an intersemiotic translation. So translating from one sign system to another. So translating in this case from the language of painting to the language that we use on a daily basis, whether spoken or written. And I'd like to point out that Cobus Murray says, well, actually, all systems that we use are semiotic. So the semiosis of painting or the semiosis of language are all different ways of creating meaning. And so actually he would rephrase this as something called an intersystemic translation. So translating from one semiotic system to another. And I think this is an interesting correction. So each of the conceptualizations that we use, whatever we use, they bring a set of expectations with them. For example, when we talk about ekphrasis, very often, traditionally, if you described a painting, you would do so through the medium of poetry. This is a long time ago, which is not something that you would be expected to do today. You'd probably be involved in an intersemiotic translation in describing the detail of the painting, which I will attempt to do as we go along. So I looked up the word legend because it's the legend of Saint Jerome and how he removed the thorn from the paw of the lion. And the definition of a legend is a story rooted in fact, but which has been elaborated over time so that it is largely fictional. So fact. So what? Yes. What fact are we talking about? Yeah. Is it the fact of the lion, or is it another fact? It's hard to know. We have no historical evidence. So we have degrees of fact and fiction. Paintings that tell us different versions or episodes of the story. And we have scenes depicting the legendary actors and the action. So the actors are Saint Jerome. In the Van der Weyden painting, he is dressed as a cardinal in the foreground, and as a hermit in the background, where he has removed his clothes as a cardinal, which is probably understood as a sign of humility. In the Dürer work, we see the enlightened scholar, the erudite translator, the one that we often find depicted also in the books of modern day books of the translator as working alone in his office, out of sight of everybody. Then of course the second actor is the lion, and as I said already, in the Van der Weyden painting, the lion looks more of like an emblem, like something you'd see on a flag than you would see in nature. Whereas in the Dürer painting, we have a truer to life lion, although I'm not sure whether Dürer had ever encountered one, but the lion we see here looks more like a cat than a lion actually, but it's a fairer attempt at a lion than in the Van der Weyden painting. The Peruzzi painting is kind of what you would call anthropomorphics, because if you look closely at the lion's face, it seems to have human features, as if the lion is on a par with Androcles, that they're kind of both the same type of creatures, which I think is an interesting thing to reflect on, where the human and the natural meet, something like that. Whereas in the Batten one, which is the more recent drawing, it's the lion is seen ostensibly suffering, and he's in pain, and looks more like a comical caricature than the actual the way he's depicted in the others. And then we have Androcles, who in the Peruzzi painting looks like a young man about town and dressed in the clothes of the time, enjoying a conversation with his neighbors. Whereas in the background, we see him as a shepherd who with the lion is taking care of all the creatures, like farm animals, but also the creatures of the forest. So both wild and tame, if you like, and that's his job. So whereas in the Batten drawing, we have the solitary old man who is who's been banished from his, run away from injustice actually, and find himself befriending a lion. So the action we see in this painting, so obviously in the first one, we see the saint removing the thorn. In Dürer, we see the saint working in a study. In Batten, we see the slave removing the thorn. And in Peruzzi, we see the social interaction and caring for fellow creatures. These are the two things we see depicted. There's a before and after, if you like. So the action of the saint removing, or the slave removing the thorn, and the seeming peace that comes afterwards. So I'd like to comment on that as that and other themes that you will see in these paintings. So the themes are both human or humanistic, and because these paintings are very much part of Christian doctrine, they're Christian also. You have this notion in Van der Weyden of charity, helping, healing, and humility. So the saint healing the lion, and also the humility expresses by taking off his clothes of, high renown of being a cardinal and becoming a poor hermit, away from the luxuries of, ordinary life. In the Dürer drawing, we see this peace that emanates from it. There's a sense of harmony there. And the loyalty is also depicted in the iconography. The dog is a symbol of loyalty, as is the lion, because the lion stays with Saint Jerome for the rest of his life, as he does in the story with Androcles. Next to that, in Dürer, you have a whole series of themes that are part of Christian iconography. For example, the skull on the windowsill is an allusion to mortality and the vanity of human effort in relation to death, that sort of thing. In Batten, so the lower right, we see friendship, gratitude, loyalty, and the same thing in Peruzzi. We have friendship, we have loyalty, the sense, and also a sense of peace and harmony that we can see in the background, which is similar to that in Dürer. Now, if you look at this from another angle, if we use Vladimir Prop's functions, we can see other things coming out of the painting. In Van der Weyden, we have what is called absentation, where the hero is forced to leave the safety of whatever it is to carry out a difficult task, which is in this case encountering a lion and healing it. So he accomplishes that, so there's a solution. And the same is true in Batten in the lower right drawing. We also have an absentation and solution. So the slave runs away from his unjust master and finds himself in a place with a lion who's suffering. So in the Dürer and the Peruzzi, we have what you would call recognition and transfiguration. The recognition comes from the fact that the true hero has been recognized for the deed he has carried out and is hence transfigured. So moves from an area where there is danger to a place where there is peace and harmony. And in the Dürer painting, we can see that Saint Jerome has the halo around his head. He has achieved this sense of holiness through his work. In Peruzzi, we see that same thing, that the person who has been enslaved is now a free person, and is not only free, but is in harmony with nature in all sorts of different ways. But there are less obvious themes in all of these paintings. And I think one of the obvious ones is communication and the capacity to translate. So the gift of translation that allows people who translate to diffuse critical situations, to negotiate power, to restore order, and to reestablish communication between people. And less obviously between people and nature, which is what these four paintings illustrate as well. The obvious things we recognize in translation. So the idea that the saint or Androcles is capable of approaching a creature that we usually consider as being dangerous, and somehow solve the problem, is something that translators have to do in diplomatic situations, in war zones, in all sorts of places in the world where there is real and present danger, and somehow manage to do work that is admirable. So a lot of these things I've mentioned now have been listed, have been studied and researched, and we are familiar with them in real terms as translators. And they've been studied from other angles as well in political science, etc. But what is key and remains key in all of this is translation, no matter what approach you use. So all four pictures show us our interconnectedness, either humankind in harmony with nature or the resolution of an imbalance between humankind and nature. So translation is either the engine of that resolution or forms the basis of the resulting harmony. So this interconnectedness that is the result of translation, Michael Cronin studies this in one of his books, and to do so, he coined what he called the notion of the tradosphere, the traduction, as they say in French, so the translation sphere. So by tradosphere, we mean the sum of all translation systems on the planet, all the ways in which information circulates between living and non-living organisms and is translated into a language or a code that can be processed or understood by a receiving entity. So in the case of Saint Jerome or Andocris, there was communication between a creature and a human. And this, I think, is what, with the growing awareness of global warming and the dangers we're causing to the planet, that we have to think about these matters also from a translational point of view. In a similar vein, Cobus Murray points to the importance of reassessing our understandings of translation and asserts the following. Translation is a process of constructing complex semiotic relationships between living organisms and nature, between living organisms and other living organisms, and between living organisms and artifact. So the message here is that translation is a means of bringing people together for a sustainable future. So united in translation, yes, definitely, but perhaps in more ways than we can imagine. So, merci beaucoup tout le monde département de français. Thank you very much for listening, and I now welcome any questions you might have.
Thank you very much, Professor Flynn. I wish we were doing this in person. I would have asked participants to give you a resounding round of applause. I'm very positive that each and every one of us enjoyed your unique way of addressing the theme of this year's celebration, which is United in Translation. And you brought out the fact that we do a lot more than translating. You know, we bring people together, and through our work of translating, we negotiate, we restore order, we diffuse critical situations, and we re-establish communication. And those are things that I really found remarkable in your presentation. So thank you very much for the wonderful presentation. Dear participants, so if you have any questions, you could raise your hand or write the question in the chat box and I'll read it out. Thank you. So I have Casimir's hand up. Please go ahead and ask your question.
Hello, Casimir.
Yeah.
I can't seem to hear you, Casimir.
I think your internet is.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
First of all, I want to hear Casimir. Okay. Hello, can you hear me? Bonjour, the Department of French Translators Day. I say big congratulations for you. And I equally want to thank the prof for the. In fact, we learned a lot. We learned a lot. The last one, we would like to have him from time to time to enlighten us, to give us more. Any of the activity of translation this way. Today we are trying to do our best as a translator to, as he pointed out, to bring people together, But we have challenge. The challenge posed by the can I call it software translation. Today, people don't trust against us. They just prefer using Google, using DeepL, using some other means developed by technology to translate. Now, what do we do to continue having our profession? Thank you, Prof.
Yeah, it is a very real and valid question. Thank you for that, Casimir. I know things like DeepL and such are actually getting better and better because of the input of translators. So you could perhaps argue that we are ruining our own profession, but I'm sorry, I don't think so. I still believe that we will always be needed because DeepL can't think. It's only as good as the input we put in there. So this is a bit of the illusion about what we call artificial intelligence. It doesn't think. We think it does, but it doesn't actually, and it cannot articulate or draw on resources in the way we do by bringing things together. The complex act of translation can never be fully replicated by a machine. People can use Google Translate to get basic things done, but there are other levels of communication that need human interaction and will always need human interaction. So I think we can be safe in the idea that they will always need us wherever we are. And I think we should embrace machine translation and just accept it as it is and try and improve it. But I think we should be fairly safe in the opinion that we will never be replaced by a machine. So I hope that is an answers your question to some extent. Look at me, I'm still doing it. People still come to me to ask to translate stuff. Yeah. And I'm 67. Almost.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you, Prof. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a question in the chat which it's quite similar to the question that Casimir just asked. So Omar wants to know whether you think translators will no longer be needed or valid because of these new applications. I think he just answered that question.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Jedu would like to you to explain why translation has a never-ending nature. Sorry. Could you explain why translation has a never-ending
nature? Well, because of the a lot of the things we say, and I think there was a professor at the University of somewhere in Finland, and she asked her students to start taking notebooks of all the things they thought might be translation. And they were amazed to discover that a lot of the things that make their way onto the TV, news, all sorts of things actually were actually translations from some other language. And probably they were translations from other languages as well, somewhere else. It's just that we're not aware of this. We think, okay, we're listening to the news in the evening, or we watch somebody talking about a topic, or whatever, on your local TV or on the radio, and you just take it for granted that that person is telling you firsthand what's going on. But very often, more often than not, that person has got that information from somewhere else and from another language, and has translated and made it available where you are or where I am. And this is, the indivisibility of translation, that it's there always. And if you look at how things move around the world and have been moving around the world from the beginning, translation was always there. Even if you look at the Assyrian civilization that we can find archaeological evidence of, the clay tablets that are so famous, even those tablets contain translations. So it's as long as there's speech, there's translation, and I think it's and will continue to be that way. And I think this is well, we're very much aware of this now, particularly in what they call the global era, wherein translation is increasingly needed. but it's always been there. It's and it's, I think if you look locally where you are, wherever you are, and start digging and, you know, looking around, you will find the evidence of translation, I'm sure. I'll sign that now I guarantee you will. I hope that answers your question.
Well, I hope so too. All right, so there are no more questions. Okay, there's a link in the chat where participants can fill a form to give us their feedback. There's a question from Mubele. A career in translation could take you anywhere. Where could this be and why? If a career, okay, so if a career in translation could take you anywhere, where would it be and why?
A career.
Yeah.
I think one of the best ways I've heard of describing this was a man who works for the European Commission, who's a translator. And he came to speak to my students one day, and he said, you should look at translation if you are you're training to be a translator. You should think of it in terms, and this was his term, of what he called collateral excellence. It's a very strange term. We usually talk about collateral damage. He said, no, collateral excellence. So people have a tendency to think when they become translators that that's only what they're going to do. Just that, just translate. But actually, while training to become a translator or an interpreter, you have, without realizing it, learned an awful lot of other things that you can use in all sorts of different situations that involve communication, not just merely translating at a desk or at a computer. So the languages you study, the cultures of those languages, all of these things become assets to you in your career. And you can use them to good effect because you know you've studied them and you have the sense of security and certitude about them. So next to thinking in terms of traditionally, okay, I can get a job for a translation agency or whatever, you could also get a job in a big company that needs people who have multilingual skills. So let's say if you look at the training for translators and interpreters, which is very, very good, you should think in terms of multiple possibilities, building on the confidence that you've gained while training to become a translator. So your career can take you, like this man I know, to becoming a head of a translation service for the European Union and writing speeches in a couple of languages for European commissioners. Now, how about that? That's not bad, is it? And he started, like I did, and like you, training to become a translator. So, yes, I hope that answers your question.
Well, not bad at all. I hope my translation profession takes me to the, well, University of Ghana will take me on, so let me not continue. Anyway, thank you very much, Prof. Manyaja would, okay, so this is her question. Because the world is more Anglophone than Francophone, people in the English-speaking world tend to minimize translation and are often unwilling to pay the price for it. Why that?
Yeah, I know what you mean. I know exactly what you mean. Je comprends tout à fait. It's an unfair, it's a power thing. People think because everyone speaks English that everyone, people think that everybody speaks English the way they do, which is not true. And because they think they can get away with it. You know, this is an old colonial mentality. It's not a very good mentality, and it's a refusal to recognize other people's differences. And actually, we need more and more French translators because of this, unfortunately. So there's a whole area of culture that has been ignored as a result of this idea that everybody speaks English. So I would just stand firm and refuse to accept this state of affairs and charge them more money if you can, and remind them that they don't know what they're talking about, obviously. I was born, I grew up speaking English myself, but I also speak French and Dutch. So I think we should encourage everybody to take the trouble to learn at least one other language, because it is an enriching experience. And of course, I don't have to tell you people this, you know that already. So I'm fully behind the French department, and I think you should make sure you charge full price for what you're doing.
Right. Thank you very much, Prof. I'm going to put these questions into one. Mm-hmm. And then if there are any more questions, you can put them in the chat or send Prof. Flynn an email. All right. So what drew you to a career in translation, and at what level of proficiency can you comfortably call yourself a translator?
What drew me to translation? I think it was kind of more out of necessity than I found myself living in a country here in Flanders, to which I emigrated, and I discovered that I could put my language skills to good use. I'd always been interested in studying languages and literature, but then I discovered that I could translate things for people and make a career out of it. And this was a very interesting discovery for me. And I started translating anything and everything from instructions for tractors to a play by Racine. So I did all of this, and I learned, by doing that, I learned an awful lot of things. And I eventually was called, on by university to start teaching, and then I started teaching, and I never stopped translating, but I never did as much translation as when I was a professional translator. And now that I'm retired, I'm back again at my old job translating, which I enjoy very much. In terms of proficiency, I think I'm, I can safely say that I know enough French and Dutch and mastered those two languages to be able to translate fairly accurately from them. I think we are all, as translators, faced by forced to make choices in what we translate, and I think this has very much to do with our own temperaments, our own preferences, things we are drawn to in the world, topics and areas of of interest. And that's a good way of thinking about it, because then you can say, okay, I'm going to focus on these three areas perhaps within a language, because you can't do everything. And some of my students preferred to do legal translation. Others didn't like that at all. Others preferred to translate for media, for museums or cultural institutions, that sort of thing. So I think these are all factors that play a role in our choices, and we become as they say in English, practice makes perfect. Huh? The more you do it, the easier it becomes. So yeah, something like that, perhaps.
Thank you very much, Prof.
Yeah.
Thank you for the wonderful presentation. We learned quite a lot. We are very grateful for your time, and we hope to meet you soon in other conferences and in other. So thank you.
Let's hope so. I wish you all the best. I'm going to stay on and watch the other presentation. So thank you very much for guiding me through this. It's much appreciated.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Prof, if you could leave your email address in the chat. So
yes. Okay, I will.
The questions in the chat, we'll read them we have an open forum at the end of the session. So we'll read them and we'll try to answer them later. Forgive me for that. The question on machine translation sort of sets the tone for our next item, the next item on our agenda. So as we all may be aware, the use of technology is on the rise all around us. And this does not exclude translation and interpreting. And so colleague translators and interpreters keep asking the questions, does this spell doom for us, for our profession? You know, Professor Flynn answered some questions on that. But in our next session, some students are also going to present, open, the floor for a discussion on this particular issue. So please stay tuned as the students lead us in this discussion. Thank you.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Good morning, everyone. Please, I'm one of the students. I'm one of the students supposed to lead in this discussion of whether our topic actually goes like this: machine translation, friend or foe. So I have my colleague Atawu Ajadi, who stands for friend, and I stand for foe. So I would like him to start as I come in. Monsieur Atawu, please, if you're around, please come and say your point so that I come in.
Yes. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Please go ahead. I can hear you. Just go ahead, please.
Okay. What I can say about the machine translation is if I should summarize, I think that we need both machine because we need to be more productive, and all what we need is to be good at what we do. We need to be good at what we do. But we need machine translation to be more productive. Thank you. Hello.
Miss Kazu, if you could. Give us your opinion.
Yes, please. Okay. All right. So our title, Machine Translation, Friend or Foe? Okay, so machine translation, we all know. Yeah, I should say we all know is the means by which we use machine to translate instead of the human being. And it is also known as computer-aided translations. That are, we have syntax-based, word-based. We have a couple of they are in classes. So discussion this morning is focused on whether machine translation is a friend or a foe. And my friend Olufade is supposed to talk for friend, and I am going for foe. Okay, why am I saying it's foe? It's a foe because that we are the present age that we are in. Machine translation has contributed to laziness of translation students, whereby in the olden days, learners of translation, knowing that there isn't a machine, use only the dictionary, and then they are ready to have the expressions and meaning of words, every word in the dictionary. So at a point in time, you would want to learn the words offhand, and then you wouldn't have to be opening the dictionary always. Okay, so to me, it has made students lazy. It has made students lazy, and then the quality of students of late is low, because if we can look at professors of translation.
Hello.
Monsieur Ataou, please.
Wait, sorry. Okay, no.
I think I can go on. Okay.
Yeah.
So if we should consider our old professors in translation, yes, they know things offhand, not like we new translators who are coming into the system who rely so much on this expression. Immediately we go to the machine, we'll just get it. So we feel somehow reluctant to learn expressions, the meaning of words offhand, that's we could just be asked and then would know it. It's no more the priority of students. And then I would also like to say that the machine has brought into existence unprofessional translators. Why am I saying so? Because in the time that there wasn't machine translation, you would only have to learn translation before you can qualify as a translator. But in the present age that we are, you see people just using the machine to translate. Someone just knows a little French or a little of some other language, and then the person calls him or herself a translator because the person has all this traders, memsors, all this kind of translation tools to use. okay, and then they see themselves as translators and they are parading the streets, and in a way they even get much work more than we do because they know how to convince the people, and then they end up messing around with the with the translation work because they don't produce good translation. Okay, so these are 2 points I would want Mr. Atau to come so that I will come up with
Okay,
the other points
I
that I
can
have here.
I can react.
Okay.
Okay, I don't think that machine translation entail laziness for translator, because first of all that machine translation contains are input by translators, and secondly, is a question of culture, because for a professional translator, he's supposed to have learned that machines are a kind of aid to be more productive. So machines are created by humans, and all that is created by human is not perfect. It's just for help. So it is to the translator to put the quality, to add what is missing by machine. So in the program of our program, the translator should learn that he must not be addicted to machine, but he just need to use machine like a tool needed to be more productive and to be consistent. So if someone wants to be lazy, he will be lazy even without machine. So the laziness is not related with machine. That's what I want to say about your statement. Thank you.
Yes, Ms. Gazu, your reaction. Seems Ms. Gazu is having a challenge. So I don't know if Mr. Atau, you'd like to make some concluding remarks before we continue.
All right. What I want to add to finish is that the challenge for machine translation is rather about the ethics for translator and the question of security of the text of the work. So the secret of the work should be kept very well, because all that is related to the new technologies are sometimes weak for the question of safety of inputs and outputs. So that's what I want to mention concerning the challenges of machine translation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tau. I hope that the points raised by the students have given us some food for thought. And at the open forum, I know most of us are itching to add our voices to it. This is a question that will keep lingering on our minds. And so I know that the discussion about this topic is going to be very interesting. Mr. Francis Motoro will give us a presentation on technology and interpreting, which has to do with the topic we just read. Francis is a young conference interpreter and a second-year graduate student of the MA Conference Interpreting Program of the University of Ghana. His working languages are English, which is his language A, and French language B. He has a background in tech products management, which he brings into the conference interpreting profession. So Francis is going to give us a presentation on technology and interpreting. Francis, you have the floor.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I hope everyone can see me and hear me clearly.
Yes.
Great. Thank you very much, Linda, for that introduction. And I want to thank all those who have spoken before me, particularly the prof, who particularly in his responses that he gave to the questions that were asked, he really touched on very important points, which will also feed into what I'm about to say. Consider what I'm doing right now, not as a presentation of some sort, but just as a talk to try and speak to the much asked question about machine translation, about technology, and about how technology is going to affect or take jobs of interpreters, translators. And this is a fear. This is something that is always talked about. And I often wonder why. To start, if you're an interpreter or even just a regular participant at a meeting, do you notice that when someone is reading a very long speech that they wrote out, you start to phase out? Or even for interpreters, have you ever wondered why it is much more difficult to interpret a speech that is being read out, written text, than it is to interpret a spontaneous speech or a natural dialogue? I'm sure if you've attended a large medical symposium where they're reading out those speeches, you know what I'm talking about. So this all feeds into the role that technology has to play for us as interpreters. You see, understanding machine translation is key to understanding this debate. And because you see, machine translation is powered by dozens of algorithms. And today with artificial intelligence, that has now been added to the equation. It now provides neural machine translation, which is sort of what the prof was talking about. Because what this does is that it takes decades of research. And by research, I mean input from translators. And from the input, with the input from translators, it creates a framework of algorithms. And all of these are designed to recognize patterns almost as the human brain will do. And so it uses machine learning to recognize these patterns from translators in order to then create memories that would enable the system to work the way a translator would normally work. But we all know that this cannot be 100%. It cannot even be 70% in my opinion. So you see, in the comparison between humans and machines. I think that we tend to sell ourselves short by comparing ourselves on objective terms. You see, objectivity is great in every form of conversation and every debate. But the truth remains that we would be deceiving ourselves if we told ourselves that humans are largely objective, because we are not. And you see, things like artificial intelligence, they typically excel at tasks that are rooted in objectivity, in the objective reality. For example, artificial intelligence or technology would outperform we human beings at driving cars or diagnosing, illnesses, or even predicting crop yields in the agricultural field. Or if you play computer games or even video games, have you ever tried playing chess on a computer with the computer? It will humble you. Same thing with, any form of video games. But you see, when it comes to translation and interpreting, the most sophisticated technology on earth by far is still the human brain that we have up here. And this is because natural languages, by contrast with other systems, are subjective constructs. Languages are things that were invented by we human beings to communicate with each other. And this language gives us, as the speakers, a sense of identity. And understanding this language is rooted in analysis, identity analysis, sentiment analysis. This is why, according to someone who I like to read, Valérie Taylor Bouladon, she says that interpreters are mediators between cultures. This is very important to understand because you see, in different cultures, different interactions, little things such as greetings, for example, can mean a lot of things in different cultures. For instance, I was watching something the other day and I learned that in most European countries, people do not just walk up to strangers and talk to them. It will be considered something that is weird. But in the US or in Africa here, in Nigeria, Ghana, someone can just walk up to you and ask about a game or ask about a movie or just talk to you. Or I know in Nigeria, or in a place like Benin where I have stayed, a stranger can just see you, greet you, and ask you, "Oh, how's your family? Et la famille? Est-ce que la famille va bien?" Now, just imagine asking a European who is not used to talking to strangers. Imagine asking him, "How is your family?" That question could be considered a threat. If you're not careful, you'll be reported to the police. Because why are you asking about his family? What's your business with his family? You see, and even beyond greetings, in conversations between people of different cultures have a way they try to prove a point or explain something. I want you to picture this. It's 11 p.m. You were at a bar with your friends and you're leaving a bar and it starts to rain. It's raining really heavily, but you want to get home. Your friend there, who is from another country, he has a car, but his car doesn't have air conditioning. And we all know that when it's raining, your windows have to be up, so you need air conditioning. If your friend was an Englishman, a British man, he'll try to be diplomatic when you complain about his air conditioning. He may say something like, "Oh, it's raining. Why don't you come in? And at least the heat in the car, since there's no air conditioning, will keep you warm till you get home." He'll try to cajole you because that's what the British do. They are diplomatic people. But if your friend was a Russian, he'll give you the opposite for you to weigh up and choose. You complain about the AC to your Russian friend, he will tell you, "Well, how about I leave you here to walk in the rain to your house and I drive home? You choose." But if your friend is an Indian man, if you've interacted with Indians, you notice that they like to talk starting from what is ideal, a utopia in some sense, to what is a reality. He might say something like, "Oh, yes, everybody would like to drive a car with an AC and be cool and drive home. But right now, this is what we have available. So we just have to get home in it." And if your friend is a Nigerian, he will just be sarcastic and say, "You don't enter." And you yourself, I'm sure when you look at the rain, when you look at your dress, see the walking distance between the bar and your house, you know what to choose. So all of these things, demonstrates why, from an interpreter's standpoint, the tone of voice, the body language, all of them inform the speaker's intent, and they all have to be accurately analyzed in order to convey the message in the target language well. Ladies and gentlemen, you need to understand that interpreters are not parrots. No, interpreters have to do a lot of thinking, a lot of brain work. They have to synthesize, they have to summarize information while trying to remain faithful to the original intent of the speaker, sometimes even when the speaker makes a mistake. This is why I loved the depiction that the prof gave using the St. Jerome and the Lions painting. This shows that, you see, language is an art. And you need to understand that language is an art when you're having these conversations about technology and interpretation. Which is why I believe that we as language service providers, we must embrace technology. We must see technology as a tool that will facilitate our work and not take over our work. I remember someone I was speaking to who said that, well, technology will only weed out those who are allergic to technology. And well, I did see some sense, even though it's still debatable, but I largely agree with that saying. You see, because technology can be so useful to us as interpreters. We can use it to carry out our research, to build glossaries. In fact, we have more opportunities now thanks to RSI and even beyond that. So we should see technology and the development and improvement in technological systems as something that would improve our work. For example, I believe that very soon we would see improvement in interpreters' work if proper machine transcription technology is developed. Imagine being in a meeting and the interpreter is speaking and the interpretation is being transcribed on a screen for the participants as subtitles while they listen to the interpretation. Something like that would work. Or even the participant speech being transcribed on a scene for interpreters while they work, so that they can quickly see what the person is saying and not miss out numbers or figures or things like that. Even though I'm not yet 100% sure about how well that technology would work. I suspect that by the time it's accurate enough to actually help interpreters instead of confuse them, it may still not be fast enough to be helpful in real time, given the speed at which interpreters have to think and work. So basically what I'm trying to say here is that when having these conversations, what you need to bear in mind is the intent of technology. Understand that every single technology that has ever been invented in mankind's history has been intended to be used as a tool that would assist we human beings in our endeavors. Already, simultaneous interpreting is a collaboration between human beings and machines. And our brain already does most of the heavy cognitive lifting, but we will not be able to properly deliver the finished product without the headphones we use, the microphones, the transmitters.
Vous en avez pour 1 minute, s'il vous plaît.
D'accord, merci beaucoup. And so you understand that human beings are the ones that create the real added value, and machines function as a supporting tool. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't doubt that a day would come when maybe computers will develop a human-like command of natural languages, because quite frankly, I fear that, looking at the way humanity is advancing, in our desire for comfort, we may overreach ourselves and we may overexploit the knowledge in our brains and the riches of nature to such extent that humanity would then sink into decadence. Because already when you hear a lot of conversations about the word progress has now come to mean the progress of machine. But the truth is, I still believe that day is much further away than most people think. And to me, I think it's obvious that by the time human translators and interpreters are no longer needed, we would have much bigger fish to fry, because artificial intelligence would no longer be a means to an end, but an existence in itself with its own consciousness. And ladies and gentlemen, that is something that I think we need to worry about. Thank you.
Thank you, Francis. Thank you for the wonderful presentation. I think we all get the input that technology is not going anywhere. So we have no choice but to live with it and to use it to the best of our ability, and to use it to facilitate work for ourselves. But as Mr. Livesey rightly said in a chat, we have to be good at what we do. So we can use technology, all right, but we should know how to use it to our advantage. Thank you very much, Francis, for adding your voice to the conversation. Up next, we have seasoned translators among us who are going to share with us their experience, what they do, how COVID has shaped their profession, and how they think their work helps in ensuring unity in the world. As we may be aware, the theme for this year's celebration is United in Translation. First of all, we would like to hear from Mr. Sefa Owusu. Mr. Sefa Owusu. He is currently a freelance conference interpreter and translator with a qualification in translation from UCC, GIL, among others. He has experience working with UNESCO, FAO, West African Monetary Institute. And so from his short profile, you can see that he's really seasoned. Mr. Sefa Owusu, if you're around, if you could share with us your experience and how you think COVID has influenced or shaped your profession, and how you think that as a translator, interpreter, your work contributes to forge unity in the world. Thank you, Mr. Sefa, for your time.
Hello.
Yes,
Good
Mr.
afternoon.
Sefa. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, all. Linda, this thing was misbehaving, so the link wasn't. Put the question again, please.
We would like to share with that. We would like you to share with us what you do, and also how COVID has sort of influenced your profession, and how you think your work helps to forge unity in the world. So we have about 5 to 7 minutes, briefly.
It will not reach 7 minutes. Well, Linda, when this COVID started in last year in 2020, I think I was then in Banjul for a meeting when we heard that this China virus was decimating people there. And so I came just about 10 days. I came back in March, on March 5th, and the borders were closed on 15th March 2020. But personally, I don't think the COVID has affected me negatively as a translator. The only thing I feel about the ill effect of the COVID is that I do not travel again. But when ECOWAS is organizing a meeting in Abuja or any part of Nigeria, or they give me my usual contract, they send me the contract, and whatever documents they want to translate during the period, they bring them to me online, and I translate them and send them back. So within this COVID period, I think I have serviced so many meetings, including a 21-day translation contract from the African Commission on Human Rights. So I think even with the COVID, the work we are doing behind the scenes do promote unity, in the sense that when discussions are being done at the highest level, whether in the sub-region of West Africa or at the international level, translators are recruited and they work. So at the level of diplomacy, discussions may be going on very well, and translators do play their part because documents be sent, and when we do our work behind the scenes during the COVID period, we still see that there's an impact at that high level of governance. And in effect, we are also promoting diplomacy and unity. I think that is what I can say, because people may not see you live at the conference venue. It doesn't mean you are not impacting the discussions and deliberations going on at the highest level of governance. So Linda, that is what I can say for now. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sifa. I was wondering if you could turn on your video briefly.
Okay, okay.
I didn't want to cut you, interrupt you as you were speaking. So
okay.
Yes. So
okay.
Good to see you. Good to see you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation, Mr. Sifa. Please, if you have any questions, you can drop them in the chat box. We'll take all the translator and interpreter speakers, and then we'll go to the open forum where the questions will be addressed. Thank you. Our next speaker is Mr. Joseph Sesu. He is a freelance conference interpreter and interpreter trainer since 2000. But interestingly, he doesn't have a formal training as an interpreter. He later had a professional upgrade in the first batch of UG Legon Palm 6 interpretation student 2012-2014. Okay, so it means he started his profession without formal training, I should say. He had an internship at the DGSCIC of the EU Commission in 2014 and has been a trainer for the DGSCIC EU Commission Brussels since 2015. Mr. Sesu, thank you for accepting to share your experience with us. So if you could just in 5 to 7 minutes, talk to us about what you do as an interpreter and how COVID has shaped your work, and also how you think you as an interpreter help to promote unity in the world. Thank you. Is Mr. Sesu online, please? Okay, I think he's not available at the moment. We'll move on to the next speaker. Our next speaker is Mr. Philip Abugri. He is a trained translator with a diploma in translation from the School of Translators, and he has an MA in translation from the University of Ghana. He was called to duty in the International Civil Service in 2015 when he joined WAHU, West African Monetary Agency, as a translator and interpreter. He resigned his position in 2018 and joined West African Health Organization, WAHU, in the same capacity, but in a consulting role. His working languages are French, Spanish, Portuguese, into English. Mr. Abugui, thank you for your time. Would like you
Thank you very much, Linda.
Yeah.
Thank you to the organizers and all the descendants of St. Jerome in this forum. I'm glad to be able to share whatever little experience I have with all of you, and I'm conscious of the fact that we mainly have our students in mind. Now, as seen from my profile, I have another life before civil service, international or whatever. I was working on the open market and trained before I had the opportunity to train with the Massen program at Legon. And I would like to take advantage of this forum to encourage all stakeholders to ensure that that program remains healthy and vibrant. Because prior to that, I had struggled applying to so many institutions across the world. And I mean that, although I didn't even have the resources. Eventually, Cameroon promised to take me in, but for some reason, never did. This was the very year in which Legon opened up that program. And here am I can boast of having been trained in interpretation. Now, in my career, having in mind the theme of the year, United in Translation, I'd like to say how my work, most especially at the West African Health Organization based in Bobo-Dioulasso, has or may have contributed to the effort of uniting us. You know, when COVID struck, we were all taken by surprise. Nobody was prepared for it, least of all those of us in the region, that is the West African region. Now imagine, this was a health issue. Nobody can do without health. Health is the key mover, the prime mover of everything that we do. If you are not in good health, you cannot perform any work. Now, my institution, the West African Health Organization, was at the heart of processes. And it was a shame to read across the social media network people lambasting ECOWAS as an institution and, you know, forgetting that they had specialized agencies like WAHU. All this while, how did WAHU work, and what role did I play with my colleagues to ensure that aid and succor was brought to the region? Now, we have 5 at the Department of Translation, at the Translation and Interpretation Unit, 2 of us being interpreters, the 3 being translators. Now, when COVID struck, people needed to consult. What do? We have a problem at hand. What do we do? Do countries have the capacity to individually solve this problem? Of course, that question remains rhetorical, because to date, we have come to understand how impossible it is for any of us to survive alone. So we took off on the 14th of February 2021 to the city of Bamako, Assembly of Health Ministers, where the first coordination meeting took place. I was in the booth, of course, and we worked long hours into the night trying to come up with a document that would be acceptable to all stakeholders within the West African space, 15 countries. Of course, you'd imagine that the fact that we have different interests would kick up a can of worms at some point or the other. But everybody, both the health experts and the translators and interpreters in the room, were mindful of the key role of unity. If we had not managed to harmonize our positions, if the interpreters were not there to help these various groups agree to a program, West Africa still would have probably remained an orphaned region in the effort to rein in the COVID-19 virus. On that occasion, I noticed that one of our colleagues happened to be working alone in the booth, not because she is not professional enough, not because she did not know that this was against professional principles, but simply because she was obliged to do that. And there was simply no time for argument. And so we understood that as professionals, we needed to deliver the goods first. This was an emergency. It was not like any ordinary situation. What I'm aiming at with this particular anecdote about that meeting is that, yes, we may have a gamut of professional rules, but sometimes common sense has to prevail in this kind of situation where we are dealing with an emergency. That is number one thing. The other thing is that the interpreters in that room were uniting their professional efforts with the efforts of health experts to rein in a pandemic. And I can imagine countless interpreters across the world who were quickly whipped out of their beds to run to the sides of technocrats, facilitate communication, and get the job done. This is what we do as interpreters. This is what we do as translators. We sometimes have to take the marching orders, move to the battlefront, and get the business done. At that point, sacrifices are made. When I talk of sacrifices today, I would like to move from our region and look at the global scene where today we are discussing the Afghan crisis and how some interpreters have been left in the cold with their families. They cannot be taken across the Afghan borders to safety because of various processes. Today on St. Jerome's Day, International Translation Day, I would want to spare a word for those ones. We stand united in our sympathies with those colleagues and hope that succor will reach them soon. Now, I don't know how much time I have left.
How about a minute, please?
A minute left, yes. So back to this conference. I know that students are wondering, how do you do your work? Now, the work that we do does not rely solely on us. We are not the originators of documents. We are not the originators of meetings. We operate along the chain when others have already accomplished some work. We need to have the team spirit, again, bringing us back to the issue of unity. We need to learn to be good sport when we are in an interdisciplinary team, such as the one that I work in. There are sometimes points of disagreement, even regarding terminology, but our duty is not to supplant these professionals. Our duty is to collaborate, to cooperate, and deliver a product. Once we succeed at that, we will be able to work for a better world. And this is what our colleagues across the world have been doing for ages before us. I thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, Mr. Budui. Thank you. Indeed, translators and interpreters are unsung heroes. Yes, and I also thank you very much for the encouragement to sustain the Massings and Translation program. We hope that you join in mentoring our students as well. Thank you very much for your time and for sharing your experience with us. We are moving on to our next speaker, Mr. Edem Gliche, who is a trained translator and a conference interpreter with over 50 years of experience in the field. Mr. Gliche is currently a conference interpreter for the AU Commission under the AU Framework Contract and a consultant interpreter for the World Health Organization, WHO Afro. He holds an external diploma in translation in English, French, and German, a BSc in Banking and Finance, and a Master of Arts degree in Conference Interpreting. Mr. Gliche, thank you for accepting to share your experience with us. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can. Good to see you.
Good to see you too, Linda. Thank you very much for having me on this program. And I would like to use this opportunity to thank all of you who have put this program together. And also to salute my colleague interpreters and translators who have already contributed by sharing their experiences with our students and all of us. Allow me to digress a little bit and speak to the issue of machine translation and the brief presentation made by our student. First and foremost, I want our students to understand that once you translate a document, you become the originator of that document. That is why you must ensure that whatever product you are giving out to your client is authentic. I believe your trainers must have told you this many a time, but it's also important for me to highlight this. You made a quick presentation on machine translation, but those of us who have been in this field of translation interpretation for a number of years, we can tell you that when you put a text in any machine translation application, the machine, whatever it does for you is to give you what we call in translation term et version. The machine translation will not be able to give you a product that will know which technique in translation to use at any given point in time in your text. For instance, your machine translation will not be able to determine whether to use modulation or use modulation de structure or modulation de sens, or even to proceed with what we call étoffement. These are just some of the few techniques we use in translation. It is only the human brain who will be able to determine that, well, in this very particular place in my translation, I need to do this or do that. Even if you put your text in the machine, it still needs the human brain to ensure that the text is authentic. Now, let me also speak to this issue. Machine translation and artificial intelligence has come to stay. Those of you or those of us who are in the profession already and those who are yet to join must come to this realization. It is going to be better and better. That is why it is important for you to also look at trying to see if you can specialize. If you can specialize in a field that will do a good, that will give you, that will not only give you an edge over your other competitors, but it will help you enjoy your profession. And on that note, let me share my experience with you as a translator. I used to consult for the Port Autonome de Lomé, where I was translating their technical documents. And there was a time a document was sent to me, and when I reviewed the translation, the original text, I saw that there was something wrong. So I had to call the one in charge of operations, and I let him on this before the thing was rectified and sent back to me. On another occasion, I was translating an investment promotion policy document for a country where I noticed a serious mistake in the document, a technical mistake, because of my background in banking and finance and accounting. The mistake was that The consultant indicated in that policy document that when the government grants any company a tax credit, the tax credit could be carried forward for the next financial year, which in accounting doesn't happen anyway. So I had to call the consultant. I had to ask for the number of the consultant and call him and draw his attention to the error he made in his document before he came to the realization that yes, that mistake was grievous. Now, supposing you did not realize this, you translated the document as it is. Although you have done the original, you translated the document in accordance with what the original text is, but that mistake is serious. You are going to put a whole country in a serious problem. Not only is the revenue of the country going to reduce, but also that consultant will be in trouble. And you as a consultant too, you'll be in trouble. You see, so it is important for you to be looking at specializing. My background in accounting and finance, for instance, makes it possible for me to feel much more at ease whenever I have any document to translate in economics, finance, accounting, or banking. So it is important for you not only to study translation, but also be interested in other fields of study. These days, knowledge is all over. If you cannot go through a well-structured academic institution to gain a second or another ancillary knowledge, you can study on yourself. It's a matter of capitalizing on the resources you have, the internet, and ensure that any field of study that's of interest to you, you take it up. Now, let me also speak a little bit about my experience as an interpreter. When the COVID started, I was still at the African Union, where I was an English interpreter. Quickly, what I did was to discuss with the head of our department and quickly come back. And I was among the first group of people who were quarantined and were accommodated in hotels across Accra, if you recall. So the COVID has not affected my profession as an interpreter that much, because as soon as the African Union started their activities, I had to run back and then resume work as an English interpreter. On this note, I'd like to thank you all, thank Linda and thank Dr. Chatu for the good work you are doing at the department, and also say kudos to all the MA Conference Interpreters students under the Massing program. And I'm happy to say I am a product of the first batch of that program, together with Philip Abugri, who just spoke before me, and Joseph Sesu. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Edem, for those wonderful words and for the advice you've given to our students. I'm sure they've taken your advice and would work towards it. Thank you very much. Mr. Sesu is now available, so he'll be speaking to us next. Mr. Sesu.
Linda?
Yes, Mr. Sesu, please go ahead. You can turn on your video and you have 5 minutes to just share with us your experience and yeah, how COVID has influenced your work.
Thank you very much, Linda, and thank you to everybody. Before I proceed, I would like to have a solemn thought for some of the colleagues who have departed from our world. Allow me to solemnly mention names like Steve Tate, we have Mbua, Victor Nyava, and Jose Dovonu. God, and it has pleased him to allow them to go ahead of us. However bitter it is part of life. And thank God we that are left behind can continue what they have been doing so excellently. And that was just a thought for those who have departed from our noble profession. Translation, interpreting, language service render as a tool of unity, a tool for uniting. In fact, listening to the brilliant presentation by Professor Flynn, he said it all, and all our contributions go to buttress what he said. And the leg that I would like to concentrate on has to do with the unity among practitioners, unity among translators, interpreters. One good thing about this profession is that either you are the professor, either you are the teacher, the trainer, either you are 80 years or 20 years. Once you're qualified to sit in the booth and interpret, you are. And that tells you about the humility, the intellectual humility that is involved. That is, no matter the number of years of experience, a colleague of yours who completed training just 3 months ago, a year ago, 2 years ago, once that colleague is qualified to sit by you, you should make life any sentiment of you guys just came out of school. This unity of thought, this unity in the assignment, knowing that however brilliant, however experienced you are, you cannot and are not allowed to handle single-handedly, allow the tautology, to handle by you alone a full day of conference. You're going to kill yourself. You might need that tender and young and just out of school colleague to support you, to serve as a support for you to display what you can offer with your experience, with your competence, with your skills. So being united in translation for me has to do more with the friendliness that should prevail among translators. It reminds me of an experience that I had with, how do you call it? A lawyer friend of mine. He's now I would say the Chief Justice at the Constitutional Court of Benin. When he was practicing as an ordinary lawyer, he went on a case with a lawyer who's supposed to be his opponent on that case. The battle was tough. You know, arrows, fierce arrows from here and there. And he won the case. But at the end, he called a colleague. I was with him. And then he called a colleague and told him where he failed. Can you imagine a lawyer telling his quote unquote adversary in a case, telling him, my colleague, you failed here, you failed there, you open up here and I got in and I got you with a clear understanding that you are my adversary today. You are opposed to me in a case today. But if you're a brilliant and excellent lawyer, tomorrow I will call you, I will team up with you to be on a case. So it tells you that every interpreter, every translator must work and invest into his colleague, into her colleague. You must work to promote one another. What are your secrets? Shared. Where are your strengths? Share them. Where are your weaknesses? Talk about them. That is the way we are going to be united, so that the day you fall on any of your colleagues, you said, yes, this is a resourceful person. But if you work to dismantle, if you work to destroy anybody, the day you most need the person, that is the day you will realize bitterly that the person does not have the competence that you could have helped him or her build when you had the opportunity to tell them, do it this way, henceforth, do it that way, because this is a continuous learning process. I don't call these a profession. Interpretation, translation, it is not a profession. It is a school. Because every day, look, I was in a document, just a last example. Yeah. I was translating a document, just a few seconds. And I jump into a word, petty cash float. When you question DeepL, it will tell you flottement for float. You go somewhere, it will tell you, it will divert you completely if you don't know the concept of petty cash. The word float at the end will put you off completely. Whereas in good French, it's all about caisse de menu dépenses. So it tells you, in fact, it is a continuous learning process. And thank you very much for this great opportunity given me. I salute all the dinosaurs that are connected. I salute all of you, and I'll give the floor for other interesting interventions. Thank you very much, Linda.
Thank you, Mr. Sesu. Thank you. Your smile is indeed infectious. Thank you. And one thing I got from your intervention is that we should support each other, we should collaborate, and also for the senior ones to tag along the younger ones. And for that, I will always remember the late Mr. Victor Mbwaniaba. Yes, for his support. It's now time for the open forum. We are behind time anyway, but I'm sure we'll spare some few more minutes to have to discuss as a group. Thank you. So Mr. Casimir has raised his hand. You could go ahead with your question, and I'll also try to read some of the questions in the chat. Anyone can feel free to respond to any of the questions that are posed. Thank you very much.
Okay. Hello. Thank you again for the opportunity. Let me thank again the organizer of this conference. Listening to various interventions about the use of technology in translation, I would like to say that the fear is not about using the technology by the translators, because it is an indispensable tool that facilitates our work. But the fear is about using it by a non-translator taking out our job from us in the name of translation. So I want to say, what we need to do is to do more awareness towards the population, towards our clients, that they should not be giving translation job to anybody, anyhow. So they should look for professional. I also like to come to the intervention of Mr. Owusu. Yes, I think what he said is very. Hello, are you hearing me?
Brief for us. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. What he said about COVID, continue working through during the COVID time. I think, I'm also a translator and interpreter here in Nigeria here, but what COVID did is only preventing us from attending physical conferences. For example, me, I continue working from the comfort of my house through Zoom. Every day when we have something, they contact you and you use the technology, Zoom, and I continue doing my work. But the only aspect, as a translator, I also have my equipment we used to hire for this COVID now, all the material for equipment for interpretation. So we're not getting anything from it, but that's not the problem. But as a translator interpreter, continue working from our houses. That is the second point. The third point I want to mention is about what Mr. Philip Abuguri said. Through his intervention, I know that he's talking about the professionalization of our work. Sometimes when they say you are a translator, you have a domain where you can excel. You cannot be a translator for all domain. So we need training. So as a translator, you need to be trained very well to be able to carry out your work very well. Thank you very much.
Very well. Thank you very much. Sorry, I missed an item on our agenda. We would invite Beatrice and Francis to talk to us a bit about what the Department of French has to offer in terms of translator and interpreter training. Thank you very much.
Bonjour, est-ce que vous m'entendez? Bonjour, allô, est-ce que vous m'entendez bien?
On vous reçoit 5.
Parfait. Merci beaucoup, Linda. Merci beaucoup à tous, toutes les merveilleuses présentations précédentes. Je suis vraiment ravie d'être parmi vous. Alors, je m'appelle Béatrice Maniga et je suis interprète de conférence freelance basée ici à Accra. Et je suis également formatrice au département de français à l'Université du Ghana, préparant les étudiants de master à l'obtention du diplôme en interprétation de conférences. Et je suis moi-même diplômée de ce programme, heureuse diplômée de ce programme en 2020. Alors, j'ai le plaisir de faire une rapide présentation des programmes de master qui sont offerts par le département de français en interprétation de conférences. Et ensuite, Francis présentera le programme en traduction. Alors, en tant qu'interprète, mes langues de travail sont le français, qui est ma langue maternelle, donc ma langue A, l'anglais, qui est ma langue B, et l'espagnol et le créole sont mes langues C. Donc, je vais m'exprimer en français et je suis heureuse de pouvoir compter sur mon collègue interprète Francis pour qu'il puisse traduire mes propos en interprétation consécutive afin que vous puissiez bien me comprendre. Francis.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Beatrice Maniga, and I'm a freelance conference interpreter based in Accra. I'm also a trainer in the French department of the University of Ghana, preparing master's students to obtain a degree in conference interpreting. I am also a proud graduate of this program from the year 2020. It is my pleasure to give you a brief presentation of the master's programs offered by the Department of French in conference interpreting and in translation, which are the MA Cint and the MA Trans. As an interpreter, my working languages are French, which is my mother tongue and thus my A language. and English, my B language, and then Spanish and Creole as my C languages. I will therefore speak in French, and I'm happy to have my interpreter, Francis, who will translate what I have to say to you into consecutive interpretation so that you can understand me.
Alors, ce programme de master en interprétation de conférence, Master of Arts in Conference Interpreting. Ce programme a vu le jour en août 2012 avec pour objectif de former des interprètes de conférences professionnels à même de couvrir des réunions au Ghana et au-delà de ses frontières. C'est un programme qui forme à ce métier avec un haut niveau d'exigence pour répondre au mieux aux besoins actuels des employeurs. Il se déroule en 2 ans, couvre 4 semestres et est sanctionné par la réussite à un examen de sortie devant un jury composé d'experts en interprétation, tant au niveau national qu'au niveau régional, continental et international. Alors attention, il ne s'agit pas d'une formation en langue. Et pour intégrer le programme, il faut avoir réussi un test d'entrée qui évalue les aptitudes nécessaires pour commencer la formation. Une bonne mémoire, de grandes facultés de communication et bien évidemment un niveau de langue d'excellente facture et une bonne culture générale. Une fois le test d'entrée réussi, les étudiants suivent des cours visant à leur faire acquérir les techniques et les connaissances propres à l'interprétation de conférences. Ces cours suivent une progression qui est bien pensée pour que, au bout des 2 années, l'étudiant soit bien outillé à bien couvrir des réunions de haut niveau.
So the master's program in conference interpreting makes sense. This is a program that was launched in August 2012 with the aim of training professional conference interpreters to cover meetings such as international conferences in Ghana and beyond the Ghanaian borders. It's a program that trains with a very high standard to best meet the current needs of employers in the market. The program lasts 2 years and covers 4 semesters and then leads to a final exam before a jury of national, regional, continental, and international interpreting experts. But let it be known, this is not a language course, which is why to enter the program, you must go through an entrance test that will assess all the skills needed to start the course, which are good memory, great communication skills, and of course, an excellent level of language skills and general knowledge. Once the test has been passed, students will then follow the course that has been designed to teach them the techniques and the knowledge of conference interpreting. All of these courses follow a well thought out progression. And at the end of 2 years, the students will be well equipped and ready to cover high level meetings.
Alors, à titre d'exemple, nous pouvons citer des cours sur les techniques de l'interprétation consécutive, de l'interprétation simultanée, de traduction à vue, de simultané avec texte, d'expression orale. Et en termes de connaissances, les étudiants doivent acquérir des notions solides en déontologie, professional practice, en gestion de la terminologie, en économie et géopolitique. Enfin, un stage en immersion permet aux étudiants d'avoir une expérience concrète de la pratique du métier sous la supervision d'un interprète formateur. À la fin du programme, les étudiants ayant réussi aux examens de sortie ont les compétences nécessaires pour intégrer le marché et fournir leurs services dans le cadre de réunions, séminaires, congrès, conférences. Il pourra être à son compte en tant qu'interprète freelance ou être recruté par une structure. Et en tant qu'interprète de conférence, il ou elle est appelé à travailler pour des organisations publiques et privées de dimension régionale, continentale et internationale. Vous l'aurez compris, il s'agit d'une formation exigeante, avec par semaine une quinzaine d'heures de cours encadrées par un formateur et une bonne vingtaine, voire plus, d'heures de travail personnel, en plus de ces cours. Excellente maîtrise des langues et du travail, tout aussi excellente maîtrise des techniques d'interprétation, culture générale solide et professionnalisme sont les objectifs à atteindre. Et à l'Université du Ghana, le jeu en vaut vraiment la chandelle.
This course will include techniques of the consecutive interpreting in one A language and one's B language, simultaneous interpreting in one's A language and B languages, sight translation, simultaneous interpreting with text, and oral expression. The students will acquire a solid understanding of professional practice, terminology management, economics, and geopolitics as some of the knowledge they should gain in this course. And finally, an internship course allows the students to have practical experience of the profession, of course, under the supervision of an interpreter trainer. At the end of the program, students who have passed the final exams will have the necessary skills to enter the market and provide their services to meetings, seminars, congresses, conferences. And they may be self-employed, work as a freelance interpreter, or be recruited by an organization as a conference interpreter. He or she will be invited to work for public and private organizations regionally, continentally, and internationally. As you would have understood, this is a very demanding course with about 15 hours of lessons with a trainer per week and about 20 hours of personal work to supplement this. You need to have excellent command of your working languages, and then you will get excellent command of interpreting techniques, a solid general knowledge and professionalism. And these are the objectives that are to be achieved in this course. At the University of Ghana, this course is really worth the shot. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you. And I would then go on to present the MA Translation Program. The MA Translation Program is a program that started in the 2003-2004 academic year and has since produced many graduates working with the various national and international organizations and as freelance translators. The main objectives of this program are to train students with teaching and mentoring to be professional translators who are competitive on the international markets. Also to train graduates to have a mastery of knowledge in their chosen area, to apply new trends and techniques in their chosen area of translation, and to sustain the department's vision of being a center of excellence for learning and research in French and Francophone studies. See, this is a professional MA translation program that is unique, and it focuses on the modern translation techniques and the prevailing market trends. It's a 2-year program and it spans 4 semesters, and it consists of coursework involving practical exercises, examination, internship, and a translation project. Currently, the languages used in the program are English and French. Now, what are the admission requirements to get into this program? First, you need to have a good first degree in English or in French language and a high level of proficiency in French for a degree in English, or high level of proficiency in English if your degree is in French. You either have that or you have a good first degree in any field, and you also have a high level of proficiency in English and in French. Over the 2 years in the program, the core courses will include fundamental of language using translation, general translation, terminology management and CAT tools, history of translation, stylistics, textology, specialized translation, theories of translation, ethics, professional practice, even entrepreneurship. You would learn revision techniques, research methods in translation, audiovisual translation, and then you would go for an internship and you would then work on a translation project. So ladies and gentlemen, there you are. That was a rapid overview of both translation and conference interpreting programs at the University of Ghana. We do hope that you would visit the Department of French's website, which is www.ug.edu.gh, and you would learn more about them and join us if you dream of becoming a professional language mediator with highly trained skills. The registrations for the enrollment into the conference interpreting program is still open up until October 2015.
Voilà, si le programme d'interprétation de conférence vous tente, sachez que vous avez donc jusqu'au 15 octobre pour vous inscrire et vous trouverez plus d'informations sur le site web du département de français que Francis vous a présenté. Merci beaucoup et à bientôt.
Thank you very much and see you soon at the program.
Merci beaucoup, Beatrice et Francis. It's now time for the open forum questions. I'll try to go back to some of the questions at the top. There are so many things, but if I miss yours, kindly forgive me. Mr. First Paul would like to know if there's any aim to train the students for, I'm trying to get for the UN, I think. Just a second, please. I'm trying to get but if there's anyone who has a question, you could raise your hand.
Linda, I could help you with that.
Okay.
Now, Mr. Fisk.
Right.
Linda, yeah. So Mr. Fesqua is a retiree from the UN system and has a healthy interest in promoting young translators and interpreters. So he wants to know whether the university aims at training people specifically to sit the entrance exam, that is the language competitive examinations, since that would usually require a specific kind of orientation, so to speak. So does the department intend to train people specifically for that?
Please, may I come in?
Yes, Dr. Shachi.
Okay, so thank you so much for that information. I think that that's one of the importance of having such fora, because as a department, this is the first time it is being drawn to our attention. So maybe what we'll do is that after the seminar, we would get in touch on further details, and then we will take it from there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chachu, and thank you, Philip, for your assistance. Coming back to the issue of whether machine translation is a foe or a friend. If there's anyone, yes, Marjolaine.
Yes, I hope you can hear me. Good afternoon. Bonjour, je vais parler ma langue, le français, puisqu'après tout, c'est la journée internationale de la traduction, donc on a le droit de parler français. Très bien. Je voulais revenir sur cette question de traduction aidée par des applications informatiques, etc. Il faut savoir qu'au Parlement européen, pour lequel j'ai travaillé il y a plus de 20 ans, ils ont fait des essais justement pour, à l'époque, tenter de remplacer les traducteurs et même les interprètes avec des machines. Ça n'a pas marché. Jusqu'à présent, pour autant que je sache, le Parlement européen continue à avoir des interprètes, à avoir des traducteurs. Donc, ceux qui craignent pour leur avenir, je dirais, ne craignez rien. Et ces deux professions ont encore une belle vie devant elles. Merci.
Merci beaucoup. Je ne sais pas s'il y a quelqu'un d'autre qui voudrait intervenir. I would appreciate it if you could spend just a few minutes to fill in the feedback form for us.
Linda?
Yes, Philip.
Since nobody is taking the floor, I think I'll have to make up for a wrong that I have committed. You know, we have people who have been the backbone of this training program, people who sacrificed to make sure that the program got off the ground. And we would be remiss if we did not specifically recognize them on this forum. Madame Marjolaine Escan, who just spoke, Madame Jibola Sofolaha, who is online, and then people who have been supporting remotely by various means. Mr. Fesqual is a man of few words, but he has a healthy interest in promoting young interpreters and translators. So I think that these people deserve mention. Others who are not here now, Madame Schroeder, who is now with the WTO, amongst others, Mr. Oklu, who was supposed to be here with us all these people need special recognition. I thank you for the time.
Thank you very much, Philip. And indeed, we need to recognize these illustrious industrials, ones who have really helped to shape this program. Thank you. Miriam, your hand is up. You have the floor, please.
Thank you, Miss Linda. Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity. Going back to our discussion about the machine translation and the human translation, I just want to adapt to Mr. Francis's submission, whereby he mentioned the fact that culture is something that should be considered, that the machine cannot translate culture. He has talked extensively about it. I want to mention sentiment and the context. You know, the machine cannot translate context. Whatever it has been fed with is what it will translate as a word. But you know, words vary in terms of context. And talking about sentiment, you know, in the translation of literary text in particular, some of the expressions, you need to even call the author of a novel to know what the author means by some kind of expression. So, you know, these things are in the reserve of human beings. Probably in the near future, the machines might want to, those who manufacture these machines might want to manufacture machines that will be doing this kind of things. But I think that would take some more time. And in fact, some things are just in the reserve of human beings. So I want to add up to Mr. Francis's own culture, context and sentiments. You know, the machines cannot.
Thank you very much, Miriam.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, madam.
Give the floor to Augusta and then we'll close the session.
I think that Miriam just captured everything that I wanted to say. Yes, as I listened to the debate between the two translators as to whether the machine is a friend or a foe, I found very interesting comments there. One person said it makes students lazy, and I was like, wow. And then said it does not make them learn new words. I was like, how is that? Because to be effective in your work as a translator, even when you use a machine to translate, you need to take the pains to read over, edit it, in fact, scrutinize it to ensure that what has been translated takes care of the intercultural differences. I was happy when Miriam mentioned culture. Does the machine take care of that? If it doesn't, then as an effective or a competent translator, you need to edit it and ensure that it meets the function and also it meets the message, it tallies, aligns with the message that is intended to convey. So I feel that yes, the machines are there to assist us. They will only become a foe when we do not do our part, when we leave them to do everything. If we do our part by editing, scrutinize, ensure that they align with the source text and then they convey the message intended, then they will be friends and not foes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam, for your comments. We've unfortunately come to the end of this program. We are behind time, forgive us for that. So I would like to say a big thank you to the organizers of this program for the good work done. I'd like to thank the head of department of the French department for your support and guidance. I would also like to thank colleague translators and interpreters, Mr. Sesu, Mr. Abugri, Mr. Gliche, Mr. Sifa, Mr. First Kwao for all accepting to grace this occasion and share their experiences with us. Would like to also say a big thank you to Professor Flynn for those informative and thoughtful words to us. I would also like to thank the pioneer trainers of the Maxent program. We say kudos for the good work done. And a big thank you to every one of us. It's been some 2.5 hours. You've really participated, you've contributed to make this program interactive and successful. So thank you all very much, and we hope to see you in other programs like this and to collaborate with you in the future. Thank you very much and have a wonderful day. Enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much.
International Translation Day.
Thank you, everyone. That was a wonderful job.
Au revoir. À la prochaine.
Happy translating.
Thank you, Professor Flynn.
Thank you. You're very welcome. It was really enjoyable. Thank you.
Thank you. Organizing team, great job as usual.
Amatengazaje kuseza bakomo pamaiwaje ugaja mama early morning amatengazaje kuseza bakomo pamaiwaje magolo wali amuya mikira akutiri nerero mwana mene mwana wanzeru magolo wali amuya mikira akutiri nerero mwana mene mwana wanzeru line uyu linerero mwana mene mwana wanzeru agire gogo wana madingo namu ya mikira kuti na madingo mwana mene mwana wanzeru agire gogo wana madingo namu ya mikira kuti na madingo mwana mene mwana wanzeru simuku na mago tawizina ni malota bambo wanga tandisi na salandeka tavizina mwe ni malota bambo wanga atamwalira ndatsalandeka ngondo mama ngondo une mama mwe ngondo mama chalamanda
Tafera mwenda we
ngondo mama
ngondo une mama mwe ngondo mama chalamanda utafera mwenda we
nangomba mbiliyo tumaona lero nangomba mbiliyo tumaona lero agilesi aimbaye zogoma tumaona lero
ndipo chalamanda
aimbaye zogoma tumaona lero ndamba kuti mwakwatira mwabala mwana woyera zina lache musolo
unamva kwa ndani kuti mwakwatira ndamba kuti mwakwatira mwabala mwana woyera dzina lache Musolo. Nangopanga chingoso kwatinza kuita Musolo. Musolo. Musolo mai. Musolo. Musolo. Musolo mai. Mana mene ndamai waje ndikufuna ndipite nawo ku UK. Mwana mene ndamai waje ndikufuna ndipite nawo ku UK. Mapunziro onse akapunzire ku UK. Mapunziro onse apunzire ku UK. Ndamba koko ndamba kumatimbeko chemeri kunali chemeri kunali chemeri mama mwe iya meri mwe iya dale kunali chemeri iya meri mwe iya dale chemeri ipenguko mapacha iya meri mwe iya dale kunali chemeri akafuna kunenana akidesi inabwana tabwera nikuno. Akafuna kunenana chalamanda inabwana tabwera nikuno. Akafuna kunenana akidesi inabwana tabwera nikuno. Sinali choncho kale nthawi ya Napolo wachabe. Napolo wachabe. Watengaingalamu ukataya kumtenga kutuma kaidi ukatola kobela dona nalila maiwe wachabe. Napolo wachabe. Malizendi Buffalo soldier Buffalo to America. Buffalo soldier Buffalo to America. When I was a young boy, I dreamed to day in America. When I was a young boy, I dreamed to day in America. Oi, 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 oi. If